panel that we have now, does new public management challenge scientific freedom? We have three very interesting presentations, and I'll get right to them in just a second. But I think just to put this in context, in the last panel, and as I was listening to some of the discussion about this, it ties directly in. But the last panel was looking at kind of direct interference. And now we turn more to, let's say, indirect interference in terms of academic freedom through these kind of broader governance trends in higher education institutions. There were some comments at the end of the last panel on the logics of the system, on the neoliberal values built into the current system. So I think we take a step back in that way.
Thank you, Mitchell. So I start just head on. Let me share my screen with you. So thanks for the invitation, and sort of I decided that I feel compelled to somehow question the simple dichotomy between academic freedom and neoliberalization, which is often the framing of those issues when the current managerial approach at universities and research institutions is criticized or discussed in the academia. And I would shortly want to argue that this is a slightly faulty choice, and we may need to look for other positions to argue for let's say freedom in academia but also beyond. To raise my points, I revisited actually the original statement of principles on academic freedom and tenure from 1940, and I think that it's instructive to reread some of the key paragraphs. So I would like to point to the fact that in this original formulation, the institutions of higher education are conducted for the common good and not to further the interest of either the individual teacher or the institution as a whole. The common good depends upon the free search for truth and its free expression. So the notion of academic freedom is strongly linked here to the notion of common good. And again, when you look at the reasoning behind tenures, then again it's not somehow the value by itself. It's not the value for the scholars as persons, but again it's linked to the mission of academia to students and to society at large. Now, I think that while this is important to sort of be recall ourselves of this, and definitely this formulation of academic freedom can help in many situations to shelter academic institutions and also individual academics from interference from governmental power or certain kinds of economic powers. I think that the unhelpful, let's say, side effect or unintended effect is that it also shelters academia from society at large, and the strong connection between searching of truth, or let's say knowledge production, and the common good is both kept on the academic ground, and it enables academics to actually not asking important questions about who is allowed or not to define the common good, who is invited to participate in knowledge production, and where is the public at large. I'm not talking about public represented necessarily by governments, but publics, represented by civil society and other social actors, and the public space at large, in which common good has to be always anew sort of articulated, and it cannot be assumed in advance that we already know what the common good is. It can work for some time, perhaps, but not in a long term. And would we now say, for example, with regard to dynamic on the social media, where the public somewhat goes wild, and many scholars are very horrified by the public and fake news and alternative facts developing on these online spaces. But I think that this actually is a result of very long-term abandonment of the careful relationship of academics with society at large, and with publics, and engagements of academics, of serious negotiations of common good, and what universities and research institutions can deliver to the public. So I think that we can now perfectly see that, for example, in the in context of the current pandemic, the truth and the common goods supposedly found by researchers cannot simply be implemented to society at large if there is not a proceeding long-term and serious engagements of academics and scholars with the public. And I am not only talking about some public communication, but really sort of engagement, for example, in forms of citizen science and other more participative formats. But I think that very often this is actually downplayed or put in contrast with the notion of academic freedom. I was also quite surprised to learn recently how some questions raised within academic institutions regarding how to make our own research, teaching, and other practices more sustainable from the point of view of climate and ecological concerns, is very often very strongly resisted by many academics by saying this will interfere with my academic freedom to select my topics, to travel to conferences, to do field work in a way I want to do it, absolutely refusing to take into account the climate and ecological impact of the academic work itself. And I think that again, the argument of academic freedom serves to help carve some space for academics in society that is very special, and academic institutions sort of don't need to rethink their own practices while they are asking all the other social actors to rethink their practices in the name of climate and ecological sustainability. And I'm now really coming to the end, but I just want to also highlight another paragraph from this original statement, which I think also asks for sort of I think it poses interesting questions in our current, with regard to our current situation. So when you see how they call it extramural activities of academics are thematized in this original statement. Like, so what they say is that of course academics are invited to speak as citizens, and academic freedom should also provide guarantees that scholars are allowed to speak as citizens in the wider public space, but they warn that public may judge their profession and their institution by their utterances, and all time scholars should be able to be accurate, should exercise appropriate restraint, and should make every effort to indicate that they are not speaking for the institution. I think that again there is a set of questions, and I leave them perhaps for the discussion or reflection we can have them collectively together. But I think that it's really and again in face especially of the current situation, I think it's really important to ask how can academics responsibly behave as citizens in the contemporary public and policy spaces? What is the responsibility of academic institutions and professional associations for the people with titles they produced? And I think Michal Komm will shortly talk about how people with titles are produced in Czech academia, and what responsibilities of institutions are in this process, and also questions like what does it mean to exercise appropriate restraint in times of multiple emergencies we have been living through. So I think again very often many public engagements of academics are defended on their side with this notion of academic freedom. I have to, I am entitled to talk because there is this notion of academic freedom, but the responsibilities which originally were linked to academic freedoms are somehow forgotten. So I think that in this sense, academic freedom must be challenged. Of course, not dismissed, but somehow reinvented in context of the current post-democratic climate and ecological condition, especially regarding the modes of articulation of the common good and the ambivalent intersection of academics in citizens in the larger public space. Thank you.
sure people have questions for you directly, but we'll come back to them after we've done the next two. What I'm going to do now is just turn to Michael Komm, who's with us.
Hello, everybody. So welcome to this presentation, which I present pretty much on behalf of the collective of group called Forum Viragier, or in English, Science is Alive. And it will be about the cases of academic misbehavior and how to deal with it. How does this academic misbehavior link to academic freedom? I think this was to some extent discussed by Tereza in the previous contribution. We saw in this conference that there are many external threats to academic freedom, which can come from politicians, from different management systems, and so on. But there are also inside threats, and I think the threat is related to scientists who are not playing fair. By that I mean that they are publishing fraudulent results, or they are misusing the publishing platforms for other purpose than spreading knowledge or the common good that Tereza was talking about in her contribution. So we think in our group that actually the principles of academic integrity are a keystone to the academic freedom, that you can compare the situation to the Olympic Games, where people from different countries can compete against each other. They can have the somehow exercise in the same space, but at the same time, there are very strict rules about doping and the abuse of drugs. The topic of academic misbehavior is linked to the topic of academic whistleblowers. We have a bit of experience with this, so I will try to share this in my contribution too. What I will do is that I will go through some recent cases of academic misbehavior that we followed in our group, and then finally try to suggest some means of how to improve the situation, at least in the context of Czech Republic. First, I should introduce who we are. So our forum is a group of, it's a non-profit and non-professional group of scientists that we used to call young when we were founded 10 years ago, so that maybe not so much true anymore. By non-profit and non-professional, I mean that this is something that we do in our free time. We don't get paid for that. We don't apply for projects either. The only financial resources that we have are coming from the contributions of our members. We were founded in 2009, when there was a intended government policy how to change the Czech science, and this involved direct threats to the existence of Czech Academy of Sciences, which obviously made quite a number of people upset, and this is how the movement started. We are organizing protests, writing letters, and so on. Gradually, we shifted from the topics related to finances to the topics related to academic integrity. And we are trying to support the academic whistleblowers and point to systematic problems in Czech science. I should say that by many people, we are considered as an activist group, both in the positive and negative connotation of the term. We are the l'enfant terrible of Czech academia, in a sense, and therefore we have problematic relations with a number of academic institutions, including the Charles University. Now, the first major case of very strange, let's say, publication strategy that we encountered was back in 2015 at the Faculty of Social Sciences at the Charles University, where Dr. Stöckelová was publishing a large number of papers on very obscure topics, including the topics of coexistence of vampires and people, as I'm showing on one of his posters that I have here. He even went so far, in order to make his research more credible, that he invented a co-author, which was supposedly working at the Cambridge University, Emily Watkins. So then it looked like he's co-authoring with a major academic institution. He was very creative in ways how to, let's say, make profit for himself in academia. So he also invented his own university, which was really just a limited company, but it was called a university, and he was giving degrees and he was giving lectures in the premises of Charles University. So this man was really out of scale of what was probably happening in a smaller scale in more places. So it attracted quite some attention. Now we were puzzled. How was he able to publish his result? How was he able to publish on vampires and it's kind of funny models that he created? In fact, we found that he was using low-quality scientific journals, which in many cases were just pretending to do peer review, but they didn't do it, and they were just ready to publish anything that they received from the authors as long as the authors paid for it. Some of these journals went as far as that they were indexed in the prestigious scientific databases of Scopus and Web of Science. And fortunately, a few years before this happened, in 2015, Dr. Jeffrey Beal, who is a librarian at the University of Colorado, had put together a list of such journals and publishers, and he coined the term potential predatory publishing, or predatory publishing. This phenomena is often associated with open access publishing, but this is kind of a coincidence. We have to keep in mind that there are many high-quality open access journals, and this is really not a necessity for an open access journal to be predatory. Since the time that Dr. Beal put together his list, the academics have been fighting against this phenomena for the past 10 years with sometimes better, sometimes worse results. Many institutions just took the list and started to use it as a blacklist, but this is not a systematic solution because Jeffrey Beal, although he tried really hard and his intentions were definitely good, he was just the one person. He could not possibly cover all the journals and publishers that exist, especially since they are appearing at a fast rate. So the list is definitely not complete. And moreover, it was discontinued in 2018 when some of the publishers on his list were pressuring University of Colorado to make him shut down this list. Which eventually happened, yeah. Another strategy how to deal with this phenomena was to perform sting operations. So this is basically a case where when you send a completely bogus text into a given journal, and when the journal publishes it, you see it's a predatory journal. But this, again, you cannot do on a systematic scale because you would have to produce hundreds of these papers, but you would also have to pay for it because otherwise the journals would not publish. So you would be actually feeding the monster that you want to fight, just never a good strategy. What we did in our group is that we took Beal's list and we cross-checked it against the database of all publications published by Czech scientists. Fortunately, this database existed at the time, and we really revealed hundreds of papers which were published in these predatory journals. And this is published online. We call it Project Malivora, which is a Latin term for a honey badger, which is apparently a very tough animal when it comes to predators. This topic was then pursued more in detail, and I would say also more professionally by Dr. Munich and his group. So I invite everybody to check his blog for his more recent results. The effect was that the Czech academia started to be more aware of this phenomena, and then many institutions amended the ethical codexes with formulations such as that people should not use ethically dubious publication platforms, or that researchers should publish with the intention of spreading knowledge to the public, not just to manufacture scientific outputs, which was the approach of the Czech Academy of Sciences. With regarding to the Stöckelovský's case, what happened to him is that his contract at the faculty was not extended. He had to leave the faculty. But I need to say that the same thing actually happened to the person who publicized this case at first, which was his former colleague, Dr. Štětka. Despite the fact that this research was valued even by the Czech Science Foundation, eventually he had to leave the faculty, and he now is teaching in the UK. After a couple of months, when we published this anti-predator project and revealed all the publications, there was a press conference by the rector of Charles University, who said that this issue is only a minor issue at his university, and that everybody has been informed how to avoid this. But apparently this was a too optimistic statement, which we kind of anticipated, because just a few months later, his own deputy, Professor Kraličková, published a paper in one of the journals on Beale's list. And it happened a few times later again. The question which was the most interesting for us was, why did this happen? Why did Dr. Stöckelová produce all these papers? And we think the main reason was the system of evaluation of scientific outputs, which was in place at the time, which was called a coffee grinder. It was called like that because it included a very simple algorithm. For every publication from a given institution, the institution got a number of points, and then the points were just summed together and directly translated to the money and research that the institution obtained the next year. The system had a number of weaknesses, but I think the biggest weakness was that it allowed for two winning strategies. One winning strategy was to really do the great science and publish in high quality journals and obtain lots of points for these few publications in the high quality journals. But it was also possible to go the other way and publish lots of publications in low quality journals and obtain the same or even higher amount of points. So the system was rewarding actually this activity. Moreover, some institutions introduced direct financial benefits for the researchers. So for every paper he published, he got some extra money for his salary. And here comes Dr. Stöckelová, who just wanted to maximize this bonus, and he was actually successful in that, at least for some limited time. Now, our group has been criticizing this system since it was put in place, for this reason, but also for other reasons, which I will not discuss here. And finally, a few years ago, it was replaced by something more sophisticated, which takes into account more inputs than just the number of papers and where they were published. However, there are institutions in this country which still operate as if the coffee grinder was still utilized. We cannot understand why they stick to it. But Dr. Stöckelová was not the only one who was trying to maximize his publication output. We found recently a Professor Adam, who works in the Mendel University in Brno, who managed to publish about 900 publications over his, I think, like 15 years of career in science. That makes about one publication per 8 working days. And this is what we call a publishing mill. It's a situation where the production of paper becomes the primary objective of the work, not actually the science itself. There are several reports online which indicate that some of the figures have been manipulated, and this is now pending investigation at his own institution. We also found that Professor Adam has extensively published in journals on Beale's list, also in with publishers which are now a topic of debate over the quality and the ethics of their business model, such as the MDPI. Sorry. The surprising bit is that last month, Professor Adam was elected as the next rector of the Mendel University. And when we were looking into his publications, we found that there is another scientist with a very similar publication profile, who is Professor Kucha, who is already a rector of the University of Hradec Králové, again, producing many hundreds of publications. Just going back to Dr. Stöckelová for the last time, we thought he must have been gone from the academia, but we found recently this notice on the University of Life Sciences, which state that some of their employees entered the exclusive list of the most cited scientists in the world, run by Stanford University, and one of them was Vadim Stöckelová. Now, after we started to publicize this aspect a bit, the notice on the website has changed a bit, and Dr. Stöckelová is no longer in the list. But this doesn't mean that he would no longer be employed at the university. As far as we know, he's still working there. And also it doesn't mean that he would no longer be on the Stanford list, which, by the way, as we found, has nothing to do with Stanford University. The only thing that happened, I just took him from the website, which is, I think, kind of summarizing the institutional reaction that we often get when we point out to some problem. The interesting thing is that Professors Adam and Kucha are also on this list of the most cited scientists. So we are now seriously thinking, who are the other people who are listed there? Are these really the best scientists that we have in this country? Or are these another cases of people running a publishing mill and trying to maximize the publication production? So this is something that we are currently looking into. Okay, finally, how to deal with the situation. We are afraid that the coffee grinder and the other systematic features in Czech academia have been in place for too long, and the toxicity of their action is too large so that it can be fixed by the institution themselves, especially when the people in question become rectors of universities. Because, for example, when you have an ethical committee in this country, typically this is an advisory board to the rector. In some institutions, it's only the rector who can actually ask the committee to investigate a certain case. In principle, let's say the assembly who should control a rector's actions is the academic senate, but this, to our experience, shows a very low sensibility to the problems of research integrity. So we think that the only way forward, the only mean that could possibly work, would be an establishment of a nationwide ethical council, which exists in some countries, which could be attached to the scientific council of Czech Republic, which is an advisory board of Czech government. This ethical council could develop one single ethical code and then investigate its violations. Now, this is a big step because I can already hear the criticism that this is a violation of academic freedom, and the independence of the institutions. But I think that the situation is really calling for a strong action. We also think that this ethical council could somehow advise the scientific council on whether some aspects of Czech academia are likely to produce problems with academic integrity, and to consult the new mechanisms when they are being put in place. For example, the conditions for project funding and so on, and also to do preventive activities. So that's all for me. Thank you for your attention.
So I'll just quickly now turn back to the physical room to Frédéric Sawicki.
I'm going to talk to you about threatenings to academic freedom that are out of all proportion to the denial of freedom that they spoke about formerly. Actually, I'm going to talk to you about problem of the rich, the problem encountered by the researchers in the fifth largest economy in the world. I mean in France. Are there small problems? Maybe, but I let you to be the judge of that we can speak about. I will briefly speak about two kinds of threatenings. Political threatenings or political pressure made on academic freedom. And I will then insist on what I can call systemic pressure from as a consequence of the neoliberal reforms which were implemented in France till 15 years. Let's begin with political pressure or political threatenings. In last February, the French academic world was subjected to a violent attack by the Minister of Higher Education and Research, Frédéric Vidal was mentioned by our Polish colleague before. Frédéric Vidal accused the university of being, I quote, gangrened by Islamo-Gauchism. It means Islamism and extreme leftist. It's curious, two words which are the minister put together, and asked the leading national research organization, the CNRS, to conduct an investigation to draw up an assessment of all the research taking place in France in order to distinguish between what is academic research, real academic research, and what is militant. There is next slide is a picture of a paper of Le Monde. The title is Frédéric Vidal causes an outcry in the academic world and unease with the majority, mandated by the Minister of Higher Education and Research to conduct a study of Islamo-leftism in universities. The CNRS has condemned attempts to delegitimize various fields of research. In fact, this was not the first time that this accusation was made by a member of the government. 4 months earlier, a few days after the tragic beheading of a teacher by an Islamist terrorist, this accusation was made by the Minister of National Education, who saw this terrorist act as a consequence or indirect consequence of the lack of attachment of young French people to secularism. Academic was said by the minister to be too relativistic, no longer teaching enough Enlightenment values. They would also be too complacent with Islamism and Islam because this region was a sort of region of poor people. But what was specific with the attack of the Minister of Higher Education was not only the denunciation of Islamo-Gauchism, it was at first the fact that she asked for a real inquiry. It was perceived unanimously by the academic world as a kind of McCarthyism, sort of will to introduce herself in the academic world and an attempt against academic freedom. What is in this affair? The reaction of the universities and the CNRS was unanimous and scathing. The Scientific Council of the CNRS, which represent all the scientific disciplines, so published a communiqué denouncing a polemic emblematic of an instrumentalization of science, condemning the attempts to delegitimize different fields of research. It recalled that Islamo-leftism was a political slogan that did not correspond to any scientific reality. The Conference of University Presidents react in unison. A tribune signed by more than 600 academics met demand the resignation of the minister. The outcry was so great that the President of the Republic, Emmanuel Macron, through the voice of the government spokesman, saw fit to recall his absolute attachment to the independence of scholars. We would like to be sure that this way out will not happen again, and that the world of research will always be united in the future to protect itself from the attempts of the political power to limit their freedom to research and to think on all subjects. It will, in fact, depend on the result of the next presidential election. But as you know, there is a real threatening that the extreme right will arrive in power in France. This episode reminds us that even in advanced democracies, academic freedom is never definitively acquired, even if these threatenings are out of all proportion to what we see today in Turkey, Hungary, Poland, or to name but a few examples. But behind this big tree, there is a forest. I will argue here that academic freedom in a democracy such as France is much more or as more threatened by the reforms that they have been carried out in the university and in research for at least 15 years. Having the right to do the research you want and being accountable only to your peers does not mean having the means to do it really. This is where the problem lies, because this freedom of finding the truth is increasingly difficult to exercise for a growing number of scholars in France, particularly in the humanities and social sciences. What is a freedom that cannot be exercised? Question I will ask to you this morning. This is not just a personal point of view. It is also the opinion of thousands of scholars and doctoral students who, since 2005, have not ceased to mobilize against the permanent train of reforms that has swept over the university. Thousands of them have opposed 4 major laws in 2006, 2009, 2013, and 2020 that have profoundly changed the management of universities and the financing and the evaluation of research. The common feature of this protest was the defense of professional autonomy and the denunciation of the bureaucratic red tape created by this new organization. These two aspects should not be treated separately because they touch on the aspect on strong feeling of a degradation of the working conditions of many academics. Is this feeling biased? I will try to show you quickly that at least as far as the humanities and social sciences are concerned, this is not the case. Before that, just a remark. Should we call these reforms adopted in France neoliberal? There is a controversial discussion about this. If by neoliberal, we mean policies guided by the desire to make institutions and individuals more responsible by making them more autonomous, while subjecting them to increased competition, that seems to me undeniable. This politics of responsibility took too many forms. The first one is a pressure on the permanent evaluation of scholars and on their laboratory of research. And the second one was the competitions introduced between universities for additional long-term funding based on projects selected by international referees, as indeed been this is the radical innovation which began in 2005 And the government, the French government, decided two successive and massive plans. The first with 5 billion euros and second with almost 8 billion euros to select 10 major clusters that were allocated with an average of 750 million euros for 5 years, so that it could create a sort of big cluster which were competitive in the international scientific competition. The concentration of resources on a few universities based mostly on institutional more than scientific criteria. The principal criteria was the creation of a big university by to merge smallest university together, and also some high schools. And this concentration of resources has created windfall effects and reinforced inequalities in resources. It has stirred and resentment within the academic world and amplified its divisions, thereby limiting its ability to act and react collectively. Public money was waterlogged soil. It has produced no trickle-down effect. It has fulfilled at least one of its objectives. It has allowed some fresh university to rise in the international rankings, but in fact in an artificial ways. You can maybe show here the kind of ranking which is now regularly produced by the Minister of Higher Education, which is very happy to see that our big university, with some of them are today more than 60,000 students. So it's a sort of behemoths which were created. And now the counting of papers, publications are made on the basis of very large, huge number of scholars, so they can be more visible on the international scene and in the international rankings. The priority given to the financing of major projects has come at the cost. In fact, it sets the point very important to focus. This priority given on major projects has come at the cost of a constant reduction in the resources allocated to teaching and student life, and to the recurrent financing of universities, and especially by the creation of new jobs, permanent jobs for lecturer or professor. Universities has thus been forced to freeze positions, to freeze permanent jobs, to use temporary staff and overtime instead of replacing people who have retired or moved to another university. Maybe you can show the next slide. The next slide is very interesting. You see three evolution. In green, it's the total budget allowed to higher education in France. In blue, the trend of number of students which is very important. And in red, the total budget by students, which in euro constant from during the 14 last years is decreasing of more than 15%. This has an important consequence because I show next in the next slide to see that the wages of lecturer or assistant professor were in fact downsides. If you compare the wage of a lecturer who was recruited in France in 1985 and today, in 1985, you get almost 3 times the legal minimum wages. In 2015, it's only 1.7. Other important consequence was the fact that universities appeal to non-permanent workers. Maybe you can just have a look and the next and next. Ensuite, la suivante, encore après. Voilà, here. Okay, here you see the growth of the number of position of full professor and assistant professor and lecturer in yellow, and in red it's this is the professor of college who are here in more and more used in university, and contractual professor which are in blue. So you see the growth comparing these four status, and it translates and it shows the considerable growth of non-permanent position, and these permanent positions are in France especially bad paid, and the most part of these people are often in fact PhD students. And so as this is as a consequence is that the PhD students have less time to do their own research, because they are encouraged to make lessons in our curriculum. So the mass of students increased, the additional task of correction, selection of candidates, and accompaniment of students for the permanent teachers, professors, researchers. The pressure on universities to professionalize their training means that they must, that we must redouble our efforts to establish contacts with companies and institutions in order to find internship for students and recruit professional speakers. The low level of recurrent resources allocated to research laboratories force, in fact, researchers to set up time-consuming projects. Only some happy few beneficiaries of some kind of niches manage to continue to do research once they are recruited. You should know that for instance, sabbatical are very rare in France and are not systematic. So this has very practical consequences on the way you do your research. All researchers which need time to go to the archives, to make observation, to go in foreign countries during a long period, or to make field research are concretely today impossible. So the main research are oriented on statistical based material, or are very theoretical papers, and it has as a consequence the fact that many fields of the society of the social reality are not very deeply studied. In fact, the most original researches today produced in France are produced by PhDs or post-PhD, because they are obliged to publish or perish, or by retirees, or by full-time searchers, full-time scholars who belong to the CNRS. Maybe it's exaggerating, but it's a trend, a real trend, and it's as a consequence a profound fatigue. Fatigue. And I just mentioned for the newspaper, they makes a front line with. Peux-tu montrer la suivante, la ligne du encore après, voilà. What is ironic, as it's this reform during these 15 last years, as a consequence, this is the causes of the decay of French research. So we have to we must have a serious interrogation, critique, or the consequence of neoliberalism reform. And the last one is for Jérôme and all the public after the last one. Oui, encore. Là, encore. Okay, yeah, it's an academic burnout is threatens everyone and is becoming a research topic in the world. So the story is here. Thank you, and sorry to be a little too long.
Thanks so much, Frédéric. And we have a little bit of time for questions and answers. What I wanted to just talk about briefly is that ethics has been a thread in all three presentations. And what I didn't tell you all in sort of introducing both Tereza and Frédéric is that they're both on ethics committees. Tereza's with UNESCO and Frédéric with the French Political Science Association. And my guest question, and as well, Mika, you also called for this Czech ethics committee, right? So my question is really, to what extent is the misbehavior that we're talking about an endemic consequence of these systematic pressures of the system, or is it just about unethical people? And to what extent do we need some sort of new academic code of ethics and ways of enforcing it? And to what extent is that putting the burden on the wrong people? I mean, and do we need systematic change that embeds certain different values? And I guess here, that 1940 statement that Tereza, you shared with us, this has values that are just antithetical to neoliberalism. In other words, in neoliberalism, we encourage promoting the self, promoting the institution, as opposed to in the 1940s, that was verboten, I suppose, in a way. And so just Tereza, Frédéric, based on your experiences, are these committees that you're on effective? Are they sufficient to accomplish what we need? And Mika, what would you hope for from the committee that you're calling for? And do you think that that would be a sufficient step in resolving some of these issues? What I'm going to do though is let you think about that and see if there's some other questions. And I think what we'll do is we'll just take one round of responses. So if I can collect a few more questions from the audience.
So I'd like to say thank you to you and to all participants. And my remark, this is not a question, this is remark. My remark is addressed to the second team of authors, my colleagues from Czech academia, and my remark is addressed to evaluation of science. Specifically, we called it like a coffee mill system, and the newest one, which was presented in 2017, Metodica 2017. So as a part of Metodica methodology or method 2017, program, or as an evaluator of the Czech governmental program M17 plus, it sounds like a James Bond, like a M17 plus. I must say that it has many gaps in evaluation, and actually we haven't overcome them yet. So, and the method, the newest method, combines individual evaluation and scientiometric methodology. And personally, I think that scientiometric methodology is not very reliable, but how to overcome all these gaps toward better, fair evaluation. So I just don't know, and it is still an open-ended story, so I guess.
Well, thank you for this comment. I mean, I totally agree that the story is not finished, but there is some, at least, improvement, I would say. Actually, the people who invented the coffee grinder also argued that the system was much better than the one before, which had no sensibility to the actual scientific outputs. So I think it's still a continuous struggle. The important question is that how is this discussed? What will be the fair system of science? And we think there is a severe lack of open discussion about it. That the discussion happens in a closed forum. Sometimes there are pressures from different players in the academia who see that this or that aspect of the system could play better for them. Rather than thinking about what is the real fair system of evaluation. So yes, this will be still an ongoing struggle, I guess. It must be the same situation in other countries too, in this aspect.
Yeah, this is a general question also from my side that tries to bring together Czech and the French case that are most prominently here in a broader general, not only European, but international perspective. These kind of neoliberal tendencies in academia are not only happening in our countries, but we can see it in Great Britain, in Italy, in Greece, and a lot of other countries. In Germany, there was a liberal think tank close to the Bertelsmann Foundation, who was particularly important in stressing in the 90s the urgency of these kind of neoliberal reforms inside the academic systems. Is there anything that in your both cases, or in your cases, you can see these kind of international ties and international tendencies, particularly important and implementing these kind of reforms in a problematic sense?
I'm very fascinated with Tereza Stöckelová reminding us kind of old understanding of liberalism, and I very much agree with Vichayan that the shift in how the scientists or the academics imagine is quite telling, and also interesting to see that what we heard was a kind of classic 19th century liberal ideal of the public citizen. so to say, and now we are much more living in a different understanding, even a different liberal understanding of the individual. And I think it's very much reflected in how academics saw themselves. So I very much thought it would be so easy to go back to that kind of understanding. But my question pertains to this issue of you raised also the common good. And my question is whether we can treat knowledge itself as a common good, or we need something more to take it as a common good, because I think it very much pertains to how we imagine also the management of academia. This is a very different output. And also, even if we think of the knowledge as a common good, you also mentioned the engagement, which I would rather think of as the distribution of knowledge. Whether it's really enough to imagine the distribution of this knowledge through that kind of civic-like engagement you implied in your talk, citizen science, activism of the individual scientist, or we really need something like the 19th, 20th century public education systems and or the broadening of the basis of university education that could deliver that knowledge to society. But in that case, we are again somehow stuck with the same dilemmas, what to do with the state, the influence of the state. So is there really a kind of way out of this labyrinth, or we are stuck eternally there?
Great. Thanks so much for an interesting question.
Thanks for the question. I try to address the last one, maybe. I think that actually it's the very 20th century idea that knowledge itself is a common good. But I think this cannot be taken for granted. I think that knowledge has to be made common good over and over, and we need processes in and beyond academia that can support this, making knowledge a common good. And of course, we can talk about, on one hand, issues like intellectual property rights, and for example, the great debate now on vaccines and the public investment actually into the research that led to the development of vaccines, while the vaccines are not that widely available, because they are in many instances their circulation and production is strongly limited by intellectual property rights, which are claimed by the pharmaceutical companies that develop the final product. And Mitchell, you mentioned Komm as the committee of the UNESCO I am a part of, and we issued two actually statements that strongly call for rethinking and revision of those intellectual property rights, so that vaccines become more available. And also, there is really wider question in how public and private funding is interlinked in many different technological trajectories. So this is, I think, one aspect of the question, the relation to private economic actors and corporations. But I think that there is also the other real issue of how knowledge can and should be co-produced with public at large, so that knowledge really truly becomes public good. And I think that it is still very much prevailing, even today in the current academia, this notion that knowledge by itself is a public good. And very often the argument of academic freedom is somehow interlinked with that. But I think that, for example, we need to, when we are talking about research assessment and funding of public institutions, we also need to creatively think about new procedures, but also, you know, kind of activities that that would provide space and capacity for academic researchers to engage in these debates on and negotiations and co-productions of knowledge as common good. So I think that when we would be thinking about, you know, new arrangement for research institutions, this should be part of the discussion as well. And I know that, for example, in Britain, the introduction of the so-called impact pillar into research assessment raised great also resistance and sort of huge debate on the academic grounds. I personally think that some sort of impact assessment in a widest possible sense of the impact is an important part of how we think about research quality and public funding of universities.
Great. Thanks so much. Let me turn to Frédéric, please. If
okay. So a lot of questions. I will be brief. The main question is what kinds of institution and how to regulate the perverse effects of the worldwide scientific competition, which is not only pure scientific competition, but also economics. And my answer is that cannot be the ethical committees, which are not enough. It is our ability to organize ourselves. There are some positive signs in France. For the first time last year has been created a college of all or the main academic societies. It means from physicists, from chemists, from biologists, from lawyers, from sociologists, from politologists, from historians. It was the first time that we decide to create an federation of all these associations which were exclusively dedicated till this period to corporatist problems. It's a first step. It's not enough, but it's time to be a real agent, actor in the elaboration, the production of the laws, of the measures, of the institutions which are decided by political power. And I think it's the reason for me to be and to be so happy to make exchange with all of you. This organization could be only national at the minimum necessary at the European level, because all the politics Jakob Vogel talk about have been decided at the European level during the Bologna summit, and with in fact in small groups, was never debated. All the politics we have to do with were never deliberated collectively. They fall on us one by one, step by step, and now we have to make with them, and we create ethical committee. We organize a sympathetic symposium, but it's never too late. But it's little bit late, too late. We should have this discussion, this debate at 15 or 20 years before. But so it's my final remark.
Thanks, Frédéric. And Michal, do you have a final remark too?
Yeah, I can maybe briefly comment on the, let's say, competition between unethical scientists and the systematic measures. I think there will be always some kind of jokers in the community who will be just trying to get benefits without actually delivering the grand results. It makes a huge difference if the community or the system tells them that this is not the way to go, or if it promotes their behavior, if it rewards them, if it rewards their institution for the behavior, and if it allows these people to actually climb up on the career ladder. So I think to investigate the systematic features is absolutely essential. That's why also I think the role of small ethical committees at the institutions who will tell you, oh no, this guy is bad, or he did misbehave, and this guy did misbehave, and this guy did misbehave. Well, that's all fine, but then the committee should also think, why is this all happening? And can we do something about it? But it has to be done, I think, at least on the nation level. Yeah. So I think it's quite essential to think about a broad scope of the issues, not just punishing the individual people who overstep, but thinking like, why did they do that? Because we know that, for example, this coffee grinder, when it was introduced in some areas, in some disciplines, it really was forcing the people to, like, they don't know what to do. They knew that whatever they do in their research will not be rewarded by the system, because the system was not just ready to somehow evaluate the typical outputs of their discipline, for example. So this is a situation when they're forced. They have a choice: either they quit or they do something which they shouldn't be doing. Yeah. So this is, of course, very tough as well. Okay, that's, I think, all for me.
Great, thanks. I mean, I think so much to talk about, and so many other avenues that I would love to have time to explore. But I think we're pretty much out of time. So